Welcome back to Instagram versus reality, the segment on the channel where we call out bad Photoshop practices and impossible beauty standards with science or just common basic sense really. As always, these videos are intended to be informative and are not aimed to target or slander anyone's brand. This week's submissions are from r/Instagram reality. For our first example, we have none other than Ariana Grande. You can clearly see, just by looking at the picture, that there's something quite wrong with it. When you look closely, you notice that it seems as if her hands are floating in the air and are not touching her waist. Ignoring the fact that her hands are just floating in the air, you can tell that it was done by a professional because you don't really see anything else that's standing out from this picture. In other words, her skin texture is maintained throughout, and there's a lot of color variation between the highlights, shadows, and midtones. The only thing that ruins this immersion are her hands, which is an honest mistake because the editor must have edited her belly and other parts of her body on separate layers. When they were retouching her belly, they also got rid of the shadows that came from her hands. There should be a clear shadow here from her pointer finger onto her stomach. Now, to fix it, just grab a dark color from her skin and just paint a shadow under her fingers. That's how much of a difference a small adjustment can make. You can just change the blending mode to soft light or overlay, and then just drop the opacity down and erase or mask out the parts that are overlapping with her fingers. With this change, it doesn't give out the feeling that her hands are just floating in nothingness and that her fingers are not touching because there were no ambient shadows in the original image. In our second example, we have a guy who's photoshopped abs on himself. Now, I feel bad for calling out some random guy in his bedroom, but it serves as a teaching moment. You can see the difference in contrast and the lighting between his original picture and the picture he pasted the abs from. Obviously, from his picture, the light is coming from behind him, from the window, and so there should be no highlights on his abs from the front as well. Unless he has a secondary light right in front of him, which he doesn't because then the rest of his body would have some sort of highlight too. It's just normal diffused light, and this mismatch in lighting is what gives it away. That's why lighting in composites is important, because you need to figure out where the shadows and highlights are gonna be, just like any other type of artist. Also, notice how his abs are very deep and defined, which probably came from a model like this. In the case of buff guys with abs like this, which are prominent and defined, their pectoral muscles are also going to be bulky. His pectoral muscles, on the other hand, are very lean and non-existent. That's another reason why this composite doesn't work, because it's physically impossible to have such irregular muscular proportions. To fix this picture, you can just take the abs from a picture that has a similar body type, put it on top, and then resize it. Afterwards, you would desaturate it or match the lighting using the curves or level adjustment layer. The color, as you can see, is not always completely black and white. There's some diffused and desaturated brown in there. You need to match that color and then the contrast using the same old levels or curves adjustment layer, and then you can mask out the rest. The end result composite is a bit more believable because the lighting is consistent and the abs are not as prominent and bulky. The next example honestly reminds me of canned cherries. There is no texture whatsoever. The lip vermilion is perfectly smooth, which no matter what kind of lipstick you're wearing, texture is not just gonna vanish. There's supposed to be highlights, creases, and wrinkles, as you can see in this picture. The model is wearing some lip gloss, and that accentuates the texture even more. So to fix it, you can just grab the texture from another picture, and then just paste it on top, similarly to the abs from the previous example. Select the lightest parts of the lips using channels. Channels contain the color information of a picture, such as the proportion of red, green, and blue. Finally, you can resize it, warp it to fit the shape of her lips, and then just erase the parts that are not needed. You can see how much better it looks now. Before, they looked like canned cherries, and now they look like an actual set of lips. As we've seen in our previous videos, photo retouching is not only prominent in just women's pictures, but men do it too. In this case, the guy has no texture on his skin and his teeth are super white. It's most likely that he has retouched his skin to the point where it's lost all of its texture and then whitened the teeth so much that it becomes another light source in this image. This is why you don't go overboard with any retouching process, because no matter how good your skills are, if you do too much, it's going to end up looking fake and uncanny. To get the texture back, you need to add a filter to a 50% grey layer called Texturizer, which you can get from the filter gallery. Then you use the texture of sandstone, which almost looks similar to our own skin texture. If you zoom in, you can see the bumps, and that's how our pores work, because they produce highlights and shadows on a much smaller scale. Next, use the Blend If slider to have the texture affect only the midtones and some of the shadows, because texture doesn't need to shine through in bright highlights. As for the teeth, you just need to painstakingly select them and then bring down their levels adjustment layer. It's not perfect, but it is passable for Instagram, considering they compress the image anyway, and it should add a slight bit of blur. Personally, it's still a bit uncanny for me, because he used a radial blur to put his face in hyperfocus, while the rest of his background is oddly blurred out, and there's nothing we can do to fix that. Moving on, we have an example of a tanning fail. I only consider this to be a bad edit, because she did give herself an Adobe tan, as you can tell from the second image, where she failed to change the white of her eyes. In the third picture, the tan is applied all throughout her body, along with her eyes, which is very unnatural. Now take a look at these examples. What is the thing that stands out the most? It should be their eyes. People who are of a darker complexion have a lot of melanin present in their skin, and also in their sclera, so the white part of your eye, which is why eyes are never perfectly white, but rather a bit yellowish. Since this is an artificial tan, there is no increase or decrease in the concentration of melanin present in her sclera. And that's often why these extreme tans look so bad with incredibly white eyes. As is the case with our example here, she probably grabbed a levels or curves adjustment layer, dropped the highlights, but didn't mask out the eyes. Since we can't make her skin light again, we'll have to create the details from scratch. Reverse engineering the Adobe tan is not going to work, so it's better to show you how she should have done it. Grab a levels or curves adjustment layer, drop the highlights up to the point that you want the skin to be darkened, and then mask out the eyes and teeth. Using the Blend If option, limit it to the shadows and the midtones only to allow the highlights to shine through. Here's the before and here's the after. It's not perfect, but at least she doesn't look like she just changed race. Now, here is another good example of a decent edit, because the skin texture is actually left intact. Even though it's very subtle, it doesn't look like a Snapchat filter where the filter just blurs out your whole face, and there's a lot of color variation from the highlights, midtones and shadows that have been left in there too. The only thing that stands out is the harsh vermilion border, so the part that separates the fleshy red part of the lips from the rest of the skin. Here, the editor has provided no feathering for the selection of her lips. There shouldn't be a perfect boundary between the lips and the skin. As you can see in this picture here, it should gradually merge into the skin instead. Even in the retouched picture, there is no harsh line of separation between the lips and the skin. To fix this, you can select the boundary of her lips and then use the healing brush tool to paint in the gradual transformation into her skin. In doing so, the lips look like they fade or bleed into the skin, as they realistically should. It's not going to look ideal, as we can't really bring back all of those fine details that were on her lips and skin, but we can get it from a different picture and apply it over the top, and for that you need to have the perfect picture shot at the same angle with the same perspective and with the same lighting. This is why professional photographers take multiple shots of the same pose. The healing brush tool takes the texture and the color from the target point that you're trying to sample by holding down the Alt button, and then it applies it to your target destination. Using this technique, it creates a feather effect around her lips, and it does look like the lipstick was applied a little bit over the boundary of a vermilion, and it just gives it a bit of a more realistic effect. What would be ideal is to perform this edit before the skin retouching, but it's passable from a distance. Here's another example of a flat picture. There's no skin texture here, which can be attributed to the fact that it's a low quality image, so you wouldn't really be able to see the texture, but you still can clearly notice the difference between her arms, belly and face. Clearly a bad airbrush or a filter has been applied. As you can see in the highlights and the shadows, there is mainly just one color present, of reddish brown. To fix this, we have to grab a slightly darker color than her skin tone to paint in the shadows, and then similarly a lighter color to paint in the highlights, blurring out the two to make it an even blend. Finally, change the blending mode from normal to overlay, lower the opacity, and mask out the parts that you don't need. Now you can see that the picture does look a bit more three-dimensional as opposed to the starting image, but this was a very low quality image to begin with, so anything more would just ruin the image altogether. For our last example, it's a little bit different. We have a picture of a girl sitting in a Lamborghini Falcon. It must be a new model or something. Even if you're not a professional, your eye directly goes to the logo because it's so badly out of perspective, the lighting is different, and it's just too saturated to have a very high contrast. I honestly don't know if she posted this as a joke or what. On the off chance that it wasn't a joke, to fix it, first you just need to get rid of the poorly placed logo using the content aware fill, which samples everything around your selection and then tries its best to mimic what it thinks your selection should look like. Then you need to bring in the logo that you actually want and paste it, distort it, skew it, and wrap it to match the perspective of the steering wheel. As you can see, the perspective is much better than before, but the lighting is still off and it's too high in contrast. To fix that, you can once again use a levels or curves adjustment layer, or just drop the opacity a little bit. Finally, to give it a little bit of realism, you have to drop the saturation and add a shadow in the direction opposite to that of the lighting source using the drop shadow option, which comes from the blending options dialog box. Even then, it's nowhere near believable because, well, just look at the picture, but it is a good demonstration of matching the lighting hues to composite objects. In this case, the blue of her top needs to influence the reflection of the logo. Alright, that brings another episode to a close. Hopefully you learned something about Photoshop and its techniques. We've covered everything here in a previous video somewhere along in the series, so I recommend watching those first to get a better understanding of the background behind what we're doing. As always, if you're enjoying the content, then you can really support the channel by subscribing and click the notification bell so you can comment first whenever a video comes out and hopefully get 1 or 2 likes and some validation.